Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And good morning to you. Happy Monday. It's the 17th of April, the Monday after Easter. So Lynn cut me off on Friday when I was saying Happy Easter. Maybe you heard, I just want you to know I wished you one. I mean, I hope you had a nice weekend. So I have no idea if we can take calls today. I guess some soul will eventually call us and we'll find out, but it's untested at this point. So I don't know. Just trying to ease in after a holiday weekend. If you were a Pittsburgh sports fan, it was a hell of a weekend, I'll tell you. Wow. We swept the Cubs at Wrigley. I mean, that feels really good. And we're up 3-0 on Columbus in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So right now we're sitting pretty, which is nice. I'm avoiding the obvious. What would be the obvious today? God almighty. The story that had the most impact on me was not involved with our politics. It was involved with the senseless gun deaths that we shrug off and take for granted. But this one got a little more attention since people kill individual people with a numbing regularity in this country of gun nuts. But this one, as you know, was different in that the killer broadcast it live. Getting out of his car, talking to us, anybody who was watching. And it was the most chilling thing I've ever seen. I wish I hadn't. Thank God when he killed this sweet soul, who he didn't know from Adam, because he was both the shooter and the videographer. The camera doesn't show the actual bullet strike, I guess. It sure as hell shows the aftermath. Facebook Live, ladies and gentlemen. A murder for you on Easter Sunday. 57 seconds, that's the post, and this guy is at large. He was just wandering around looking for somebody to kill. He sees this sweet old man carrying a bag of groceries. And he says, I found somebody I'm about to kill. He opens the door. I'm about to kill this guy right here, this old dude, he says. And damn if he doesn't. Facebook Live. That's what I want to talk about. What is the purpose of Facebook Live? Is it like, sort of like Skype? I mean, in that what's the purpose of Facebook Live? Because if it doesn't have a damn good purpose, I don't see why it has to exist. What is the damn purpose? And how there is no way that Facebook could have the kind of system that would have flagged that this user was about to murder somebody on their platform. There's no way of knowing that. So if there's no way of other people I'm sure have been killed, right, on Facebook Live. All kinds of wondrous things probably have happened on Facebook Live. Facebook Live has provided, a lot of people looks at police shootings, at rapes, at tortures. A lot of suicides go out on Facebook Live. Unbelievable. So, really, what's the purpose? We've got all these amazing new tools for sick people to glory in their craziness. And there'll be copycats, you can bet. I mean, what a way to get attention. This guy's face is all over the place. If he walked by right now, I'd recognize him. I'd know him. Know his name. It's an easy one. Steve Stevens. See his big smiling face? Now, media outlets have always had to concern themselves with broadcasting real-time violence. And there was a very famous instance here, the Bud Dwyer suicide. You guys remember that? What was he? Was he state treasurer? I'm remembering Bud Dwyer was the state treasurer, and he called a news conference, so all the cameras are rolling. And he took a gun out and shot himself in the head. One station here aired it once. They weren't carrying this thing live, so they had the opportunity to make a judgment. It sure as hell was news, but do we show the act? And I guess it was PXI who showed it once. TAE KDKA said, not doing it. And all hell broke loose when Clarence is the guy who's coming in to see if we can talk. Well, Clarence is usually good luck. Let's see. Clarence, I'm about to say hello to you, and I hope to hell we can hear you say hello back. Hello? Fuck. Excuse me. Okay. Nah. Are you sure it ain't some little funny thing?
No, I'm not sure.
No, she's not sure. Clarence, I'm sorry. I guess no calls today.
Sorry.
Hey, Clarence, email me whatever you were gonna tell me. And guys, email me. I don't know what else we can do at this point. Lynn at pghcitypaper.com. I'm watching it, and we'll share your thoughts that way. The Bud Dwyer thing, I remember I didn't quite get it at that point. This would have been early 80s. I'll tell you, the people at the station, they were watching the video. We had the video. People were grouped around editing bays and watching a man blow his brains out on television. Some did not want to see it, but there was definitely morbid curiosity. And I remember when the news director said, there ain't no way we're showing that. I said, well, who are you? Who are you to make a judgment about what other people will see when, in fact, it is a legitimate news story? Why can't you show it with fair warning? I mean, Bud Dwyer doesn't care because he obviously did that online. And I really didn't understand. I still get a little confused about where is the media's job to shield us at the same time not to give, credence, or not to give a platform to people that you don't want to give a platform to. But when media start making these decisions for me, of course they do every day by virtue of what they choose to cover, the order of importance and priority with which they cover what they cover. So obviously our news is censored in that regard by the sensibilities of people in charge. And I just sort of thought it was paternalistic. Throw it out there and let people see for themselves the reality. We got people clamoring here. They want to see it. What makes you think the people out there don't want to see it? But cooler heads apparently prevailed, and PXI, Channel 11, never ever showed it again and had to defend itself forevermore for having shown it. I've never been quite clear about it. If we'd shown it, I guess it was because it was so graphic. It was watching a man blow his brains out. That's graphic. By the way, I did not watch it. But I felt uncomfortable with the decision that then nobody could watch it. I think this was in the age before the internet, so it wasn't, if it happened today, it would be all over the internet. But that got closed down really fast. There was really no way once the TV stations, the broadcast networks said, that anyone was going to see it. The only people who saw it were the people there, people who worked at the news operations, and people who happened to be watching, I think, the noon news on PXI that day. I don't know. But quite clearly, this kind of thing that will attract Facebook Live, that will attract the worst kind of people to stage their moment of glory. This is a different animal. But you see these brow-furrowing issues that people who put out newspapers, who produce television shows, news shows, have to make. The video and the pictures we're seeing from Syria, for instance, if you don't think those are heavily edited, the horror that our president voiced when he saw the dead and suffering babies and children, that video, I'm sure, was as tame as video of that day could come. We were shielded from the worst of it. Always are. Is that good? It's easier to go to war when you never show you're dead. And we don't. It's easier to go to war if war is something that is dramatized and cleansed in some way, as opposed to the reality of it, which is beyond your imagination unless you have been in the midst of a war. I don't know. It's why I'm no news director. It's why I'm not the editor. It's why I'm not the person who makes these decisions. My inclination is always to let people make their own choices, but I don't know. Facebook now is going to have to figure out if there's some way they can control this wondrous creation of theirs. I see that when Mark Zuckerberg launched Facebook Live, which was about a year ago, he said this, quote, We built this big technology platform so we can go and support whatever the most personal and emotional and raw and visceral ways people want to communicate are. Well, there you go. That thing in Cleveland was personal, emotional, raw, and visceral. So in that regard, the guy, the killer, Easter Sunday killer, was using the platform that Zuckerberg gave him exactly as it was intended. And so we're left to back up and ask, why would you create a platform to support exactly what Zuckerberg said it's for? So that people can show the most personal and emotional and raw and visceral things that they want to communicate. Ugh. There are so many people who have no sense of what privacy is anymore, and sort of personal, what you put forward, what you keep to yourself. Why? What I don't like is being the potential audience for any of this stuff. I don't want to see anybody's personal, raw, visceral, whatever. People I don't even know. I often don't want to see it people I do know, in person, live, real. I don't know. But I think Facebook has to figure out this little monster they've created. The fact is, Facebook, there's not like some czar sitting there deciding who can post what, either on Facebook or Facebook Live. So you've got literally millions upon millions of people who are out there making their own choices on the platform given to them by Facebook. And so there's no real way to censor any of this stuff. After the fact, you can. I mean, they're actually trying to figure out how they can make algorithms so computers can identify a murder right before it happens and cut the cord. There's no way you could do that, I would think. So what Facebook does is they rely on us to flag objectionable stuff, right? That's the way it works. You see something you don't like, you flag it, report it, and then Facebook, I guess when they get enough of those, they take a look and make a decision. But that doesn't keep us from, that doesn't really would have made no difference whatsoever in this instance. And as I said, the old line television networks, TV stations, the local ones too, they've got really serious guidelines and policies that help them make these decisions. And you can bet after Bud Dwyer's suicide that those were all looked at and potentially recalibrated. But Facebook, as it exists, depends on, they depend on us. Now, Facebook, they want to reflect humanity, reality. Well, in that regard, I guess Sunday's little killing was, there it was, raw, visceral, and real. But there's this, I don't know. There are people willing to share things that none of us really well, most of us don't want to see. It's like we're being turned into a nation of voyeurs, a people of voyeurs. It has nothing to do with America. It's all over the world. We're becoming spectators, voyeurs. And it desensitizes us, I think, ultimately. And I'll tell you what else. It was a fascinating story. In the arts section of yesterday's New York Times about the predicament that television writers are in now. Television writers who write for shows that are set in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., such as House of Cards, Scandal, Veep, Madam Secretary. Those shows rely on, well, they're different, but what they have in common is that setting. And the reality is that the setting has now been superseded by the reality. In other words, you cannot compete. They used to compete against other TV shows, and now they are competing against the biggest reality show in the world, and that's Donald Trump in the White House. What 3 years ago was sort of an outrageous story idea, maybe on Veep, because it was so absurd, so that would never happen kind of thing. Well, now it does happen. And sometimes the storylines, the fictional storylines of these shows, bump headfirst into the reality now of this Trump administration. And they've had to rip up scripts. They've had to redo things on the fly because a lot of these shows like to be relatively, reflective of where we really are politically. So the reality of Trump's White House is bumping in and up against the fiction of House of Cards. And it's creating big trouble for House of Cards writers. Big trouble for Scandal's writers. Big headaches for Veep's showrunner. Because their fiction is being outstripped by the reality. You've heard comedians say it, that Trump has killed satire. It is really, these guys aren't kidding. They're tearing their hair out. And the takeaway I got from listening to this Q&A of all of the producers of these shows, where is the one thing that was said where I thought, oh my God, that is it. So the guy who I think writes for Pugliosi, who's he write for? House of Cards. He says, if you were to draw a character, create a dramatic character like Trump, man, you would be holding gold. And he says Trump, these are his words, is as frustrating and confusing and complex and irreconcilable a TV character. And now he's in the White House. So he's not a TV character. He's real. He's real. And this has made all of these people who are invested in these shows wonder what the hell they're supposed to do. A number of these shows had sort of Russian storylines going when the whole Russian potential collaboration, blah, 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 with the White House happened. And they didn't know what the hell to do. Some of them dropped the storyline. Some of them just sort of like pushed them. Here's Shonda Rhimes of Scandal. We had this Russia problem. We had a mystery woman in our show who was supposed to start speaking Russian, and you were supposed to understand that the Russians were trying to undermine the United States government through the election. You understand this is all being done before it became reality here. The storyline that these fiction writers were coming up with was overtaken by the reality that the stories they were writing were actually, to a certain measure, true and were happening in real time in Washington, D.C., in the Trump White House. And so Shonda Rhimes says, and the audience is supposed to understand the Russians are trying to undermine the U.S. government through the election. And all of a sudden, when all this started, I realized, my God, we've got to break the entire back half of our season. We've got to turn it into something else. So Trump is running away with with their storylines. And the guy who does Veep, or I forget which one, he pulls her out of the White House at some point. He says, "Man, I am so happy not to be, I guess, situated in the White House right now." These guys don't know what to do. And here's the quote. And this is the writer, one of the writers for House of Cards. "There is something weird when politics and entertainment and journalism all start to bleed into the same thing." There it is in a nutshell. That's what's happened to us. We were talking about media literacy when last we spoke on last Friday with Bill O'Driscoll from City Paper. If we, as consumers or activists in any of those realms, politics, entertainment, and journalism, if we can't tell where the lines are or where the blurring of lines has occurred, then we are in trouble. And we are. When cable news came in, it started up. Because all of a sudden, I remember talking to a respected national journalist, whose name I'm blanking on, who, when CNN started up and then soon thereafter the others, said, "This is not good for journalism." And I thought he was being sort of snooty and elitist. And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, because in order to fill their time, they got a 24-hour hole to fill. In order to fill their time, they're going to require a lot of talking heads, a lot of people blah, 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 yapping," which is true, right? And where are they going to get these people to talk about the news? They're going to take journalists from some of the biggest newspapers, and they're going to make them television stars, essentially. That was when the blurring first started. I think as soon as you had what used to be anonymous, ink-stained journalists, all you knew was their byline, and they're plucked from obscurity and made up and get their hair done and get wardrobe to look at their clothes, and all of a sudden they're not quite journalists anymore. They're performers. And the ones that are better performers end up being rich. Journalists don't get rich, but television performers get rich. And so over the years, that's what's happened, this sort of infection of journalism by celebrity. So there's that blur. Journalism, entertainment. And like so many things that happened, the Pandora's box metaphor works. There ain't no backing up. That's it now. And we were better served when the people who brought us news were unknowns. We're not celebrities. We're not stars. They were journalists. So these guys are asked by the New York Times reporter, well, so how much do you feel like you're competing with the White House rather than other shows? And they say it's extraordinary. It's obvious. The guy from Veep says, we had this character who we made such a bumbler. She tweeted stupid tweets. She said things with microphones left on, and the way that story worked in Veep is eventually it. I guess I don't watch it. Takes her down a bit, and the producer of that says, and now we have entered a world where these same kinds of things happen and have absolutely no effect. In other words, Trump, I grab him by the pussy. That's the kind of thing, if that was a storyline on Veep, that would, on any TV show, that's an ender. Because that's what we used to, that was actually the reality of the way things used to be. That'd kill anybody's campaign. And he says, the producer, but now these kinds of things are happening and they have absolutely no effect. And in some cases, they seem to have pushed him further, Trump, pushed him further along. So here's the chilling takeaway from these guys who write fiction about White Houses. The question, brilliant question, is put to them by the reporter. If you were scripting the Trump presidency, okay, let's pretend it's really just a show now because you got this great character. If you were scripting the Trump presidency, where would you have it go from here? What would you do with this character? Now remember, Trump is playing this presidency with his knowledge of drama, TV drama, the reality show. And here's what Shonda Rhimes, who's won a gazillion Emmys, said. The most dramatic thing that could happen to this character, in other words, to Donald Trump, listen to this, guys, is transformation. If he actually became a hero and actually became a good president, that would be the most dramatic, most crazy, most bizarre thing than I could imagine, which would make it great drama. So the reporter, everybody's nodding their heads, the other producers, and the reporter says, so everyone agrees that the most dramatic thing that can happen is essentially the unexpected, that this buffoon becomes a hero? That's what would make the show? Nod, 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 they all say. And then one of them says, yeah, any writer knows what we're trying to do to keep an audience is subvert expectations. So you read this, my God, and it is, okay, all right, wow. if Trump read this, he might be thinking, I could still fix this. There can be this dramatic reversal. I become a hero. I start doing, and I love this because what do I say? I love being unpredictable. I love subverting expectation. Oh my God. So, there it is. How to write TV in the age of Trump. Well, you have lots of Excedrin around. Incredible. Incredible. All right. And nobody's, All right. Speaking of the White House, I don't have much because I just can't. It was pointed out also in the New York Times, I believe, although it's been pointed out before, that one of the things that the president can do, I have never said president and then Trump together. I can't. One of the things the president can do to make himself more, I don't know, likable or is to get a dog. Even Richard effing Nixon had a dog. They all have dogs, okay? You get a dog. And a behavioral psychologist says it's hard not to notice his lack of commitment to companion animals, which is a way of saying he doesn't have a dog, for God's sake. Even a cat, a goldfish, anything. But when you think about Trump, is he comfortable in? He's never stepped foot at Camp David. That they've mothballed the place. That's in nature. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the closest Donald comes to nature is a manicured, false sense of outdoors, a golf course. So here's a guy who has no desire to be in it, has no appreciation of it. And as for animals, stop and think. The only animals that you see associated with Donald Trump, and his family, are dead ones. He raised two sons who are trophy hunters. They go off to Africa so they can kill tigers. Tigers? Yeah. So I don't think he's getting a dog. The Easter egg roll thing is today. That's supposed to be a disaster. Because that's a first lady thing to do, and there is essentially no operative East Wing in this White House. But speaking of animals, you know what I did Saturday morning? I sat in front of my computer, rapt, R-A-P-T, watching a giraffe be born. I mean, I had heard about the giraffe. Have you watched the pregnant giraffe? And I thought, well, why should I watch a pregnant giraffe? I mean, apparently for months people have been watching this giraffe named April walk around pregnant. So what? What you want to watch is when she goes into labor, which is what I did. I came in at the end. Oh my God. There was something so astounding. I mean, I couldn't take my eyes off it. It really was something. And Trump's sons would see that giraffe and want to kill it. Want to put a bullet in its head. It's incomprehensible to me. Incomprehensible. So, oh God, these tours keep coming by. College tours for Point Park. You see the parents with their high school kids looking at Point Park. They keep coming by here, and the guide says, and here we have the Center for Media Innovation, where our students can put on their own podcasts and stuff, and they look in and they see this gray-haired old lady. I wonder what the guides are saying. Oh, pay no attention to her. No, she just... God. Oh, I want to note the passing of Henry Hillman. Oh, God. Day after Dan Rooney. That's rough. Those are two big, big men in our city. And by all accounts, two pretty good men. Henry Hillman, I always just got the biggest kick out of him. He so clearly loved his much more outgoing wife, Elsie, and was just so... And I was reminded, I was thinking about him yesterday and then about her. And I never really knew them well. I mean, I knew who they were. They knew who I was. That was about it. And one day, I'm sure I told the story because it was so mind-blowing. Might have been about 10 years ago. I get a phone call. Hello, I say. Lynn, hi, Elsie Hillman. She's calling me at my house. I said, Elsie? Hi, how you doing? She said, well, I'm just fine, thank you. She said, listen, I just got home, and my secretary or my maid or some staff person had left me a note saying that you called, and so I'm calling you back. And I said, I didn't call. I said, Elsie, I didn't call you. She says, well, how odd. Then why is your name here and your home phone number? She said, this woman always she said, Lynn Cullen called. Here is her number. Here is... And I said, how bizarre. I didn't call. So we talked about that for a while, and I apologized for having done nothing, but I said, I can't imagine, Elsie. I said, I think of you as such a busy person, I would never bother you. I really wouldn't. Just go about your thing, and I'm going to stay out of your way. I said, but I really wouldn't have. She said, well, you can call me anytime, and then that was sort of the end of our conversation. Who would have done that? So somebody would have had to say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pretend to be Lynn Cullen, and I'm going to call Elsie Hillman. But how did they have my home phone number? I mean, at the time, I used to go out of my way to keep that sort of unpublished. Yeah. I don't know. Figure that one out. But that was the only time I really ever... talk to Elsie Hillman. What a nice... I mean, the thing about them that is so different from so many of the uber rich now. I mean, he was on the 400 richest Americans list forever. Is their unpretension, their absolute lack of pretension. I mean, totally regular people in how they... And the same can be said of Dan Rooney, in fact. These are ultra-rich, powerful people who, in so many respects seems sort of salt of the earth. And it's hard to lose him. I hate those obituaries. My God, they're getting... And I saw this handsome, smiling face looking out at me right near Hillman's, who was, by the way, a handsome guy, too. Ooh. It's a oncologist I know. Sweet, smart guy. I just knew him vaguely socially. And I said, what? What? I mean, he's younger than me. He's like 10 years younger than me. What are you doing there? It says died suddenly. So, bango. This is a guy who was in such incredible shape. This is a guy who did all the right stuff. Ate right, exercised, lived life to the fullest, and in his day job helped people struggling with cancer. I'm sure in a very wonderful way. He blew me away once by telling me that he had read many of my brother's books. I thought, you're kidding me, Barry. I said, I haven't even read them. What are you reading them for? They're so dense. He said, I think they're fascinating. He had such a hungry head. So, death, birth. That's where I was all weekend in my head. Oh, Lynn is telling me something that absolutely you're right. I'm sure that has something to do with it. In regard to him not having dogs, cats, or wanting to be in nature, you forget he's a germaphobe. Well, you know what the germaphobe thing is with him, I bet? It's a control thing. So he wants to be in very controlled circumstances where, boy, I hope someone in his kitchen is spitting in his soup. I really do. Yeah, he's a germaphobe. I wouldn't want to be the poor dog that ended up in his house anyway. So, ooh, Pittsburgh Girl has some good political news. Oh, I know all about this. I've got a thing here. I wanted to talk about it. Thank you. We're always on the same page, Beth. Wanted to bring you some good political news. Tomorrow is the special election in that Georgia congressional seat that was vacated by Tom Price, who is now destroying health care and a lot of other things, the social safety net, as Trump's head of Health and Human Services. So somebody's got to fill that congressional seat. And I have mentioned this, that you got a young, smart Democrat there. This is such a Republican district, it's a joke. You've got a young Republican there, but the way this race works is there's like 14 candidates. 13 of them are Republicans, and then there's this Democrat. Well, that means the Republican vote is split all over the place, and the Democrat, all the polls show him leading. Here's the negative. He has to win this. It's a primary today. He has to win this by 50%, 50.1%, in order to call it. That's it. Then there wouldn't be no second election. But if any candidate does not get over 50, they go to the top two, even if there are two Republicans, and there's a runoff election. So my gut tells me that he's going to end up in a runoff election. And if he ends up in a runoff, he ain't going to win. But Beth says good news. Okay, the Democrat by the name of John Ossoff actually has a shot of winning this thing. He's running against 12 dysfunctional Republicans. I guess there are 3 that could have a shot at winning. I think there's a woman in the race that is polling pretty well. So right now, the latest poll, he was at 46% or something, which ain't good enough because he won't win a runoff against one Republican. He can win against 12. The funny thing, Beth says, is the 3 who have a shot of winning have distanced themselves from Trump like crazy. They don't even bring up his name in ads. Huh. The National Republican Congressional Committee is flooding the area with television ads against Ossoff, which means he really must have a chance. Well, he's scaring them. There's no doubt about it. My guess it'll be like the Kansas special election, close but no cigar. But this guy's impressive, young man. And here's the other good news, Beth, even if he doesn't get the 50 and ends up in a runoff, which I don't think he can win. Trump's rise has given rise to a lot of political activism. And the important part is you've got young people, not just in the streets, because that, up to a point, it does something. But the people who are really going to make the difference are people who are willing to run for office. And apparently a lot more young people are getting that now. Now, he's starting pretty high. He's never held congressional office. He's starting for Congress. Generally speaking, you're seeing more young people willing to take on the job of a state representative or a city council person. And it's how you finally work your way up. It's how the Republicans got so strong. They didn't disdain that ladder. And they understood that's how you do it. You don't come out of nowhere. Although these days it seems like you do. So yeah, watch that. Let's hope. Me being the negative Nelly I am, I just don't think he can get the poll I saw. It was sort of dispiriting to me. I haven't mentioned North Korea, but I do want to say this. This guy who's an expert, a scholar, Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, his specialty is watching sort of brinksmanship in geopolitics. The people who push things to a certain point and see who blinks first. And when asked what he thought about what's going on right now with the Trump administration and North Korea, he said this. Well, I look at it and it looks to me like the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion. Now, those of us who lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis don't like seeing that at all. I don't care if it's slow or whatever. Cuban Missile Crisis, the world came close to nuclear war. Thank God the Russians blinked. So, we'll see. And some people say, oh, that's a little hyperbolic, don't you think? And this guy says, look, I'll tell you this. One strong parallel shines through of the Cuban Missile Crisis and our current standoff with North Korea. And this is what he says. When national ambitions, personal egos, and deadly weapons are all in the mix, the opportunity for miscalculation is huge. Okay. Thought I'd share that with you. They had a big parade, showed their missiles. And then they tried to fire one yesterday, and it went kaplooey, blew up on the immediately. You know what's unknown? That could have blown up because of us. Because during Obama's administration, we launched essentially hacking, cyber warfare on his missile system. And that's top secret crap, so nobody owns it, nobody says boo. But the North Koreans were regularly shooting these missiles up. They weren't blowing up. They were shooting them up so often that they became an arms dealer. Other nations started buying their missiles. That's how much they look like, hey man, these guys know what they're doing. And then, with Obama in the White House, all of a sudden, these North Korean missiles start. Maybe they'd launch, but they'd blow up right after. They'd launch, they'd go, 100 feet and drop. So there was this obvious hacking going on since 2014. And it could be that was just what happened yesterday was another indication that program is ongoing. Now, if Donald Trump did something like that, he'd be bragging about it. Barack Obama does it and doesn't say boo, because that's the way you do it, right? The other good news today is that the folks of Arkansas are apparently not going to execute somebody today. Man, they're itching to, but a federal judge, actually a few judges, have stepped in. One, like a puny little Arkansas judge, said, oh, no, you don't, for some reason. And then a federal judge said, Whoa. So it could be that the courts are going to put the stop to this at least until the expiration date of these lethal drugs runs out, which I believe is like May 1. So this was what the rush is. That Arkansas wants to kill how many? 8 people in 10 days. Well, it looks like they're not going to be able to pull it off. And again, thank God for the judiciary. Wow. And one other little thing that I found. This is one of those, again, just so you know, the idea of ethics in Washington can often get cynics, howling with laughter. But it depends. There are people who value ethical behavior and try hard to hew to it. I would suggest that Barack Obama's White House was such a place. Now you got Trump. And oh my God, you can pick almost any one of his cabinet level people out and shake them a little bit and start looking at all of the conflicts of interest that surround these people. It's mind-boggling. Then look one level below them. Hey, it gets worse. So each one of these things would be a huge scandal. We're back to huge scandal in any other administration. I mean, if you can harken back 100 years to like Teapot Dome that took a administration down, that was nothing compared to what's going on with these guys. I'll just give you 2 people you never heard of. Chad Wolf. Perfect name, actually. Chad Wolf. He's now chief of staff of the TSA. Yes, Transportation Security Administration. And guess what he was before he became that? He was a lobbyist that worked for a company that was trying to get the TSA at the cost of about $500 million to buy their new luggage screening device. Now he's the head. And guess what? The device is being tested and evaluated for possible purchase. Someone is trying to... they held up something. I don't know what this was. Okay, and one more. At the Labor Department, there are two guys who joined the Labor Department. And these guys have been lobbyists who have actively been working to scuttle all kinds of rules. And now they are in a position to absolutely undo all of the things they wanted to undo as lobbyists but couldn't, and now they're getting in. The president eliminated an ethics provision that prohibits lobbyists from joining agencies that they lobbied just the day before. Used to be if 2 years, there had to be a 2-year wait before you could then take a position in which there's no wait at all anymore, quite obviously. And now you've got the visitor's log being made off limits again, so that all the lobbyists with their briefcases coming into the White House, it's not public record. Drain the swamp. Right. Okie doke, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Tomorrow we'll give it another shot. And unless we get the phones fixed, I guess Susan won't be joining us. So have a good day. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.